early in the pandemic. Anyway, thank you for joining today. I'm going to give you an update on where we are budget-wise. Here are our topics. I'm going to talk about the current year, FY21. We're already halfway through fiscal year 21. I'm going to talk about the American Rescue Plan supplemental funding we received. Then I'll give you an update on the budget request on FY for the future fiscal year, FY22, that starts October 1st. And then we'll talk about next steps in the federal budget world at NSF. So for the current year, here are some numbers to help orient you to where we've been from last year, fiscal 20, and where we are in FY21. You can see that we received our appropriations in December this year, although the fiscal year starts on October 1st. As you all are probably well aware, our appropriations almost never arrive on the first day of the fiscal year or even the first month now. So this year we received our 21 appropriation in December 2020, and believe it or not, that's a good outcome. That's fairly early. We got our money in Q1, so that was a nice outcome this year. The level we received was $8.5 billion. It was $208 million over the 2020 level and $745 million over the request. So it was about a 2.5% increase over last fiscal year. Just to remind you what all these headers mean, I'll start in the middle, the request. The request is NSF's request level to Congress. So we requested $7.7 billion. Congress came back and the enacted level is what they gave us through our appropriation that we received in December. So as you can see, we got a good outcome from the Hill. So they gave us $8.5 billion. The current plan, to explain that header, that's a step beyond the enacted level. So we make a request, they enact legislation, and then we go back with them and we haggle a little bit about how the funds are spread across the different accounts. And when we land on a final picture of funding by our different accounts, that is called the current plan. So right now for FY21, we are in discussions with the Hill about what our current plan will look like. And typically this is just moving funds a little bit between the different accounts. NSF is very fortunate in that in our legislation, we are given the opportunity to do that, but we must do it in concert with the Hill. So that we often take advantage of that when we need to. So some noteworthy items from the 21 appropriation and report language include continued support for emerging technologies and emerging industries such as biotech and quantum information sciences. They encouraged all our efforts in artificial intelligence workforce development, including at HBCUs, Hispanic serving institutions, tribal colleges, and other minority serving institutions. And they funded EPSCoR at $200 million. And what you should know is that in addition to our actual appropriation, we usually receive report language that gives us some parameters, and it gives us very explicit thoughts on what the two branches of Congress are thinking. We get report language from the House side, we get report language from the Senate side, and then we'll get some report language where they try to meld those two with a conference report. And that gives us, although it's not in legislation and ostensibly is not required, we always take it very closely to heart and try to work exactly in the parameters that they have given us. We found that definitely works in the long run. If they've given us direction that perhaps we take that we think maybe is not in the not going to work well, we'll go back to them and have a discussion, and we'll come to some agreement. What you should, I put 2 examples of report language here just to let you know what we were hearing about EPSCoR. On the Senate side, they said NSF shall make every effort to achieve efficiencies to ensure that no more than 5% of the amounts provided for the programs are used for administration and other overhead costs. And the conference report language says NSF is encouraged to award at least 1 mid-scale research infrastructure project led by an institution and an EPSCoR state. So those are just 2 examples of report language that may have a direct effect on your EPSCoR and some things you see come out of the NSF EPSCoR program. The reports are available, they're public, they're out there. And ours would be the Commerce, Justice, Science Appropriations Subcommittee report language. So if you're ever curious to get way down in the weeds, you can find that out there. We were very fortunate this year to also receive supplemental funding through the American Rescue Plan. That passed in early March. We were provided an additional $600 million. It's in 2-year funds, so we have until September 30th next year to use these funds on the activities presented in this second bullet. Right now, we are working through different spend plans with the Office of Management and Budget, which is essentially the White House's budget office, and discussing with the Hill what our spend plans and what our intentions are for using these funds. And again, it's available for a whole nother year, so 2 fiscal years, FY21 and FY22. So what's happening in fiscal year 22, our budget request? So let me give you a quick update on how this works in most years. The budget request, NSF's budget request, is part of the larger president's budget request. It usually goes to the Hill the first week in February every single year, except in years where there's a presidential transition at the White House. It typically is delayed. This is very, very common because if you think about it, the new folks are coming in on January 20th, and there's just simply not enough time to get a fully developed budget policy and budget presentation prepared to get to the Hill and to meet that normal early February deadline. So what we have been doing this year, because it is was in fact, as you well know, a change in transitions, we've been working through our budget request since January 20th to now. What did happen actually though in April was the White House issued their high-level budget outline, and then we are following with our detailed request. Every agency has a detailed request, and that is what we are working on at NSF right now, trying to put that to bed so we can deliver that to the Hill later in May. This budget outline is essentially the new administration's very high level picture of their budget policy stance, at least for FY22. Our director also, he arrived when did he arrive, Loretta? I think it was last July or August, so he's fairly new. He has already, the budget outline came out in April, and he followed with testimony to various committees on the Hill already in April. He spoke to the Commerce, Justice, Science Appropriations Subcommittee on the Senate side and the House side, and he also spoke to the House Science Committee. House Science is our authorizing committee. Commerce, Justice, Science are our appropriators. And so he has already met with them and spoken to them about NSF and our FY22 plans are on a very high level. And as I noted, we are finalizing our individual budget request, and we hope to deliver that. We plan to deliver that, finalize that this week, I hope, and deliver it next week. You should see all federal agencies coming out with their budget request. I believe the date is the 27th. So is that next Thursday? It's very close. What will happen after that is we will have briefings with our congressional staffers. Typically, our directorate assistant directors are there, and some of their program staff and their budget staff are there to give individual briefings to congressional staffers on different programs. Let me tell you a little more about this budget outline. You can find that on the web. It is the new administration's high-level budget document. If you put in your search engine, I believe it's White House budget FY22, you'll go to a White House budget page, and there's a link right there for the discretionary budget. And I think about page 35, you're going to find NSF. We have a whole page in that document this year, which it's always hit or miss. We're one of the smaller federal agencies. Sometimes we appear in these documents that most new administrations put out. Very high-level budget policy documents their first year when they come into office. Sometimes we're in there, sometimes we're not. This year we're in there for a whole page. And although I'm kind of making light of that, I would tell you that in my mind, that is a good indicator of how they view NSF. We're in there, we're front and center, and there's some exciting news about that budget. So this discretionary request is, and here's the link at the bottom of this page, if you want to write that down, where you can go and find this one page on NSF. Our FY22 request is $10.169 billion. That is almost 20% above our FY21 level. It advances climate science and client science and sustainability research. It enhances fundamental R&D. It advances racial equity in science and engineering. And it strengthens U.S. leadership in emerging technologies. And it continues construction of major research facilities. So if you go to this link at the bottom of this page, you will see each of these bullets, these bottom bullets, fleshed out. One item of keen importance, I would think, for many folks is the request for the development of a new directorate in NSF. And this directorate is it's a new directorate for technology, innovation, and partnerships. And so we're very excited about that at NSF and what that might mean and what that might look like. And you will be able to read more about that effort when our detailed budget request comes out on May 27th. So what do these funding levels mean? As I said, the guidance, our request is $10.169 billion. That is 19.8% over last year. So this orange line is our percent changes over prior years. So you can see this nice big jump up here. We're very excited about this possibility, and I hope you'll take a look at our budget request next week and look at the details behind that increase. What does that mean for EPSCoR? Well, as you may recall, as part of NSF's authorizing language, we have direction, and we also just have an internal policy that EPSCoR's bottom line funding for EPSCoR will mirror the change in NSF's bottom line. So if NSF is funded, if our request is accepted on the Hill and our appropriation actually is in this 10.169 billion range, or a 19.8% increase, then we can see the EPSCoR funding will likely increase by a similar amount. So, what's next? Agency operations will continue through the end of this fiscal year, or September 30th. We'll have congressional action on FY22 when the new fiscal year starts, either a full appropriation. Typically, in recent decades, we've had a continuing resolution that has kept us going and operating until we can have our appropriation, until it's passed on the Hill. Could possibly have a lapse in appropriation. Our planning for FY23, believe it or not, is already starting. We are having discussions and policy retreats on various executive levels. Over the summer, we typically get guidance from the Office of Management and Budget on how to prepare our FY23 requests to the Office of Management and Budget. They'll give us some broad, high-level parameters. We will also look forward to receiving a joint R&D memo from the Office of Management and Budget and the Office of Science and Technology Policy. Usually that comes out later in the summer, and that will help shape some of the finer details that go into our FY23 budget. That's NSF's budget pitch to OMB. And then OMB, through negotiations, will all come to agreement later next year and present a request to the Hill for next February. So believe it or not, we're already starting. We don't have 22 delivered yet, but we're already starting on FY23. So that's all I have. I'd like to open the floor for any questions.
Thank you so much, Beth, for that wonderful and informative presentation. If anybody has any questions, please feel free to put them in the chat. As we mentioned earlier, please turn on your cameras. Let's engage. We'll take the presentation down now, and feel free to ask questions. You can unmute yourself and ask questions, unmute yourself and say hello. And now's the time.
So don't be shy.
Okay, hey, good morning, everyone. This is Prabhakar Clement. Can you expand on the mid-scale research infrastructure priority? By definition, what are mid-scale infrastructure programs? Can you give us some examples?
Okay, what I can do is send you to our 21 budget request, our FY21 request. We have write-ups on mid-scale, our mid-scale program, our agency-wide mid-scale program. There are solicitations out there that explain that in depth. And the 22 budget request that'll come out next week, will also update those write-ups a bit. I can say in general, we have two tracks in mid-scale, and they're defined by dollar values. I believe one is from 6 to 20 million and the other is 20 to 70 or so. And there's a whole explanation of why I'm a little bit leery of talking about the details of the mid-scale programs, of course, on the science side of it.
Hi, Beth. Tim
Yes.
Van Richten, one of our program officers, is on that working group, and so I'm sure he'd be willing to explain.
He's the one, yeah.
Thanks. I can speak to that just a little bit. So there, as Beth was saying, there are two tracks within the mid-scale. This was one of the 10 big ideas from a few years ago that is now in active competition. I believe it's the second round of It's in the second round for mid-scale RI1, which is the $6 to $20 million range that Beth had mentioned, and then the larger one, the mid-scale RI2, is also in its second range. To answer the question that just popped up in the chat, there's not a separate special mid-scale call, but the emphasis on EPSCoR is definitely there in both competitions, but especially in the mid-scale RI1 competition. They added me to the working group to make sure that EPSCoR's interests are represented there. There was specific targeted language in the webinars that went out, and in the, I believe in the solicitation, although I'm not positive on that, but certainly in the budget language as well. And so we're taking a very close look at that. We're keeping an eye out for projects in the current competition, and I think that will continue to be the case going forward into future competitions, where projects that really do build the research infrastructure within EPSCoR jurisdictions are getting a close look for possible funding.
We had a presentation last year from Midscale, and so, you know, we tried to make sure you're aware of the many opportunities around the foundation through this annual PI meeting.
And I can say, if you look at there, if you search for mid-scale RI1 or just mid-scale on the NSF website, you will find a targeted page for those. You will also find links to the solicitation, the past webinar. Embarrassingly, the freeze frame that they have from the webinar is from like the 15 seconds when I was talking during the hour-long webinar, and so you see my face in front of the freeze frame. Not at my best moment, to be honest with you, but there it is.
Also, I put a link in the chat to the 21 budget request at nsf.gov, and if you want to read general information about the mid-scale efforts, there are some notes there in the chat. Also, I will say that I know this is the budget geek in me, but at nsf.gov, if you go to the very bottom footer, there's a budget and performance link, and you can find all the budget requests back many years there, if you want to if you want some to read a little bit more about that.
Hey, Beth, this is Jeremy Schmutze. I do. Can you give us maybe a little bit idea about how the climate sustainability dollars might flow down to EPSCoR from the perspective of just, you know, how does that work, or what kinds of things people might be considering, you know, implementing from the EPSCoR side?
Okay, so I know this is a bit of a non-answer, but I'll tell you the answer is that I can't tell you much now because the detailed budget request is not public. But what you can see from the White House's policy documents is they're very focused on this effort, and how that might flow down to EPSCoR. Number one is just the sheer increase in dollars. So if you're at 200 million in 21, a 20% increase in 2022, if that comes to pass, would be an excellent thing, I think. But I'm sorry, I'll have to let Loretta or one of the others talk about how that policy may affect the different proposals and the different tracks within EPSCoR.
And I can't speak to that quite yet. And you know, as we're in the planning phases with the administration, but it means lots of more exciting work for our program officers. I know they're jumping up and down. You know, because you know, being able to support your needs are very important.
So we'll wait and see.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
I'm sorry. We just can't.
Okay.
We just
No worries.
it's all embargo till next week.
Okay. Thank you.
But you're seeing all the signs from the public. EPSCoR's always got friends on the Hill. So whatever our funding level, whatever the policy direction is from whatever administration. So it's a nice thing.
Yeah, I think we'd really like to see a track 2 focus if there's any interest in that, you know, as people think about that. as you work on your plans for, how that might end up getting appropriated.
Good to know.
Thanks for the loud and clear hint, Jeremy.
Hey,
And,
that's what I'm here for.
Jeremy, I'm sure you're aware of our commitment to with the DCL that was recently released, encouraging partnerships between the Track 2 community and minority serving institutions. So we hear you, and JD speaks loudly. Other questions?
Yes, we just got another question in the chat. Could you please elaborate on the reference to the Senate's language, in quotes, achieving efficiencies and no more than 5% of amounts provided for the program used for administration and other overhead costs, end of quotes. Thank you.
Oh yes, so that's that report language. It's just a general reminder. It is a very explicit reminder that they're watching what we do with our overhead dollars. I'm sorry, I can't tell you much more than that. And so we try to underscore that always in our discussions as we go back and forth with them after we receive our enacted levels, and we try to finalize our current plans. And that goes down through especially high visibility programs and larger programs such as EPSCoR. But there's no I don't think that statement there's any kind of underlying ominous tone or anything that we should be overly concerned about. We're just doing more of the same and trying to always be cognizant of how all the overhead costs associated with running everything in NSF. You'll find if you dig into the report language, you can go to senate.gov, house.gov, look at the appropriations committee pages and the Commerce, Justice, Science subcommittee pages. You can find the reports out there and read the various items that they're choosing to surface and the direction they're giving to NSF. It's always interesting. Well, it's not just interesting. It's a huge guide for us every year as we try to make our friends on the Hill happy. Hi. I see Miss Belinda. Have you got your hand raised? Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Belinda Sturm. I'm at the University of Kansas. I wanted to ask, in terms of the technology, innovation, and partnership, if there's any discussion that we can be let in on how EPSCoR may intersect that, especially with economic development within these states.
I'm sorry. Yeah, I can't give you a huge detail on that, but I can tell you that this is the idea behind this directorate is that it ties the different pieces of NSF together in a very focused way, more so than is already happening now. And EPSCoR is one of those cross-agency efforts, but I can't give you any more details at this time. I don't know if Loretta wants to. I don't know how much Loretta is engaged with
I can't get it
at this point.
Can't give any more details at this time.
Yes,
but we know that that the agency is committed to EPSCoR and the mission of EPSCoR to ensure that that everyone's engaged in our 28 jurisdictions in all activities of the foundation.
I will say that our new director, Dr. Panchanathan, he's been very vocal and very public since he's gotten here about this whole idea of transformation and pulling different pieces together and partnerships and developing partnerships. And so this new directorate is right up his alley. So I hope I've at least piqued your curiosity enough to go seek out the budget documents when they come out next week. Oh, let's see. So I've got a question. It says, EPSCoR support is prominently mentioned in the Schumer-Young English Frontiers Act. If passed, would this be an immediate plus up or wait until the following year? So our next fiscal year starts in FY22. That's very close. That's just in October. So the Endless Frontiers Act, it wouldn't be our 21 appropriation. It would be in future years. I'm almost positive. We're already into mid-Q3. So and we're already up against deadlines for processing finishing up reviews and getting all the paperwork done to get awards made, grants, large cooperative agreements, etc. Even though our fiscal year ends on September 30th, on this side, the folks who manage the mountains of moving all that through the various financial systems, review and then financial systems, those deadlines are weeks away. Many weeks, 8 weeks, but still. So the EFA, if you haven't looked up the Endless Frontier Act, you might want to Google that and take a look at what they're talking about. It's a huge investment in the National Science Foundation. It's a huge vision for the National Science Foundation. Of course, though, there are all kind of discussions and negotiations on the Hill about that. Let us see what happens. But things appear to be moving now, but who knows where it's all going to land on in the end. But you might search for that and read that a little bit, see what they have in plan, what at least some of the iterations include for NSF in that.
Now use the point Beth made about over the next couple of months for us finishing out FY21 as the shameless plug for getting those annual reports in on the first due date. It helps us to be able to, especially if there are cooperative agreements with incremental funding, it enables us to meet the agency's deadlines.
So Loretta's administrative staff, they're the ones that get dinged when they're trying to push money out to you, and somebody somewhere else in MNSF is saying, sorry, I can't do it, don't have the report. So her folks are working hard trying to get all that pulled together so they can push out your money to you.
And if you're like me as a PI, you're like, well, I have 2 more months of work. I want to make sure all of that is represented.
I know, that's hard.
We understand the tug.
Yeah, that's hard. That's hard. All right.
Any other questions? It's not often that we have Beth Blue and we can ask all of the questions in the world of her. She may not be able to answer all of them, but we can ask.
Yeah, I'm sorry, the timing this year, normally our budget request would be out there. It's always interesting with the change in administrations, whatever administration. The new folks come in late in January and it is off to the races as far as they're developing their budget policies. For NSF, actually, we just keep plugging away, and we don't typically have a huge turn, a huge 180-degree turn in what we do. We keep plugging away. We're like a freighter. It's hard we have different policy focal areas, but we keep our mission is straightforward, and our mission doesn't typically change. We change with the change in administrations. But but it's always interesting, just always interesting to be caught up in that whirlwind. Okay.
So, opportunity for questions. Does someone have a question? We're gonna let it go once.
Mhm.
Going twice. And I think you've done such a great job, Beth, that you answered a lot of my questions and probably
So-
many of the individuals here.
Hope so. All right, thank you so much. I really appreciate you having me back this year, and I hope you learned a couple new things about what's going on in the budget world.
Well, thank you very much, Beth, and we will check out those links.
Thank you.
All right, bye-bye.
Thank you.